out in the
Obviously,
landscape.
yeah, all that sort of thing.
But
But
in
in
terms
that
of
ballpark,
like the actual, just like the three-way valve and everything, it's
Okay.
it's
And you
quite
mean including
expensive.
labor too, part-time labor?
parts and labor. Okay, so washing machine. Basically, the effluent from the washing machine comes to here, and then the clients decide: do we want that water to go to the landscape, or do we want that water to go to the sewer? Obviously, some clients have septic, so that would be septic. So let's say somebody wants to run a load of laundry and they want to use bleach in there. They can flip that switch over to the other side, and then you can see the arrow. There's an arrow here. Water goes up, water goes to the sewer here. Water goes up, water goes to the landscape. This is a air relief valve, so that just makes sure that you don't get sort of weird suction issues in there. Should be pretty much no maintenance sort of on the stuff in here, but I just sort of want to show you all Graywater systems should have a three-way valve so the clients can choose which direction things go. If things get super soggy during the winter, they can also decide to sort of send things to the sewer depending. It's just sort of on a site-by-site basis whether that needs to happen or clients want that to happen.
And then is there a reason to protect against backflow? Would there be backflow?
Great question. So basically any backflow would go into the washing machine, so not too much of a concern there. And in terms of the way these systems are set up, there really shouldn't be any concern about backflow.
Okay.
Yeah, that's a good question. Any questions about stuff in here? There's not really any maintenance related stuff. I just want to sort of show you how that works and how it's connected up. And basically so the laundry machine is doing a little bit of pumping, so that helps to move the water. So it's easier to lay the pipes for this one than it is for the gravity feed one. But again, shouldn't be really a maintenance related issue. 5 to 10.
Okay, so it's pretty low PSI. It wouldn't be enough to like go through drip tubing or anything like that.
No, and actually drip tubing is a much more complicated piece than just PSI. Yeah.
And then just one more comment for you guys, just in case we have clients who are asking, like, oh, can I do a laundry landscape system? So generally speaking, you would want your washer to be on an exterior facing wall. Like this is a little bit an exception because it was new construction too, so it's like easier if it's new construction. But for like existing, like if someone's like, oh, we want to do a laundry landscape, do you think it's possible? If their washer dryer was like upstairs or like in the middle of the house somewhere, it would be quite difficult actually probably to retrofit and do that.
Right, so when I'm doing consultations for Graywater systems, so if a washer's on an exterior wall, doing a Graywater system is relatively straightforward, not so bad, because we can send that water a decent distance, we don't have to do an additional pump, and we can just sort of puncture a hole in the wall, and it's quite doable. Bathrooms are another story. Second story bathrooms can often be quite challenging. First story bathrooms, if you have a slab on grade, so like concrete, nothing below that, that's pretty much impossible. Second story might be possible. There's just sort of a lot of like maybes. We sort of have to look at the particulars. But if people are redoing a bathroom, redoing the laundry room, redoing the whole house, then that's a really, really good time to do Graywater because you can pipe it. Okay. Rotary hammer and go through foundation, which is, did we do that for you guys, or did we get in here before they poured the foundation?
We got in here before they poured the foundation.
Okay, that's good. So we could put like a chase through it.
And they poured the foundation around it.
Yeah. But yes, you can actually drill a hole through foundation. It can be good to consult an engineer, although a lot of times I think the hole is small enough. I don't think it's a particularly big problem. But yes, in theory, doable. So what I have in my hand, by the way, this is a client that we're just sort of wrapping up. It's a rainwater and graywater operations and maintenance manual. So I'm sort of looking through in terms of maintenance stuff. So for instance, on this one, three-way valve, every year check for leaks, ensure function. And then actuator, I'll mention that too. So you go and you sort of check it and see if it's doing fine, and not much of a maintenance thing there. I will say some of our clients, we have an electric actuator, so basically there's a switch. So let's say there's a three-way valve buried in the basement. are buried in the crawl space, you can throw a switch and send the water to the landscape or send the water to the sewer. And so that can be, good to crawl under the house once in a while and just check and make sure that that's operating the way it's supposed to. Piping and tubing, if you notice water in an unusual place, checking for leaks. So for the laundry landscape system, why don't you come on over here, we'll see if we can uncover a bunch of these purple valve boxes. And so back here, maybe it's buried a little bit too deep, but there's a 1-inch polyethylene line, so it's a thicker polyethylene line than you're used to. It's probably right there, I bet. That's where it converts? Yeah, great. And so what comes in here, when you look in here, what you're gonna see is a 1/2-inch polyethylene line. So basically we're reducing down to 1/2 inch, and then there's a ball valve on the end. And the reason for the ball valve is basically, do you know how many trees are on this one versus the other one? Two?
Two on this tree.
On this? Okay. So you can, the last one should not have a ball valve because you don't want anyone to accidentally turn all of those off and the washing machine not have any place for the water to go. But you can adjust the one or multiple ball valves so that in theory you have sort of an equal amount of water going to all of the different trees. So that's what you see when you look in there. The reason it is built the way it is built is you want the pipe to go out into open space and then drop down and fill up your mulch basin, because if that pipe is in soil or in mulch, you'll have roots that grow up into the pipe and will clog your pipe. And so you want to make sure that it's clear around the end of that pipe there. So what you'll see here, it's a little bit depressed, but basically we have a donut ring around the tree that was dug out, it's dug out and filled with mulch. So water goes into the valve box, comes out and then fills up the pore space in all of the mulch. And that spreads out the water around the tree, so the tree has access to that, and it keeps the roots from growing up into the valve itself.
As far as maintenance goes, would that be something you'd want to actually excavate? If we're going to remulch this soon, should we pull all the mulch out and make sure there's not dirt coming up?
Yep. So in this maintenance guide, it talks about mulch basins. So every year, check to see if mulch has decomposed and water is pooling under the Graywater outlets. So yes, basically once in a while, you'll see that the mulch is decomposing in here. And generally what you want to do is, and this is sort of the major maintenance function, you're digging out that existing mulch. Generally you're probably sort of spreading that, and then you're putting in fresh mulch in there, in that space. So basically you shouldn't be able to see anything, it just sort of looks like continuous mulch in the bed. Yeah.
Okay, a quick question. As the tree gets bigger, are you going to want to move that mulch circle out and not disturb the roots that are closer? How do you deal with it as it gets bigger?
Yep. So when I designed this, I tried to make it large enough that it wouldn't be too much of a problem, at least in terms of the trunk itself. But in terms of roots growing into the mulch basin, I think that's something that, as a maintenance division, we're really going to have to take a look at and come up with some sort of standard operating procedures around that. I haven't done a lot of Graywater mulch, Graywater maintenance, and so I'm not sure what's typical in terms of like how many roots are going to be inside of that mulch donut. And so when you guys do that, you're going to sort of have to see and kind of make an assessment. And if they're small enough, you can cut them and it's not sort of such a big deal. But if you start to have sort of more major root growth, then yeah, moving it out further might be a good solution.
I think it's going to depend a lot on the root stock of the tree. So if it's a dwarf tree or semi-dwarf, chances are something like this size ring is probably going to be good for the whole life of the tree. But if you're talking about like a standard tree that's going to be 25 feet tall one day, it's got probably pretty something's dwarfing because the root stock is dwarfing it, right? So it has smaller root system. So I'm assuming these are we generally do semi-dwarf or dwarf trees. It's pretty rare, I think, for us to plant standards.
Oh yeah. So when you're doing this maintenance, it's a good idea to run water through the system and try to make sure that you're getting even distribution. So if this has 2 trees that it's on, you want to be checking those trees and getting a sense of whether you see an equal amount of water coming off in those two spots. Okay? Any questions about this so far?
Is there a way other than running a load of laundry to test that? Like, can you like hose fill?
That's a good question. So I don't know that this is fitted with a hose valve, but that would be a pretty good upgrade to basically install something on the line so that you can attach a garden hose and run a garden hose into there.
It'd be nice to be able to flush it too.
I agree. That would be nice to be able to flush it too. Yeah. Yeah. And so I think that's something that would actually be good to add probably to the design SOP. Could you take a note on that? Yeah. To add to the design SOP, have a way of attaching a garden hose sort of at the top of the system, and also a relatively easy, I think, enhancement to make later on if you're just doing maintenance with a client. Okay?
Hey, Damien, do you know anything about, like, I know obviously like gray water from, you know, other places in the house is going to be pretty nutrient rich, but like how nutrient rich do you think the laundry landscape gray water is?
So what I understand from Robert Port is that on the whole, plants grow better with gray water than straight water.
Sure. Yeah.
And so comparison-wise, I definitely don't, have a sense between the two. But on the whole, it's better than straight irrigation water.
Yeah, I was gonna ask. When I've done something like this before, we'd always put compost in with the mulch. Would you recommend?
Interesting,
that when we
like
do
below
that?
it. So fruit trees in general like to have extra nutrients compared to a lot of other landscape plants. That's one of the reasons that we have some of the, sort of these nitrogen fixtures in the soil, and as they get larger and their roots sort of spread, that'll become a more effective system. Compost, in addition to providing nutrients, does make it easier for water to penetrate down into the soil. By the way, this is actually an important thing to mention here, sort of this far into the planting. This soil was scraped bare. I mean, we were down to subsoil here, really not in a particularly good space for planting plants. And I think we did a pretty good sheet mulch here, is that right? Yeah. Because the soil was so damaged by the whole rebuilding process. So anyway, to answer your question more directly, it's not something I've typically seen recommended. I would say sort of assess the tree, get a sense like, do we want to add more compost to this tree generally? If so, adding it to the bottom of that ring, that's a great place for a tree to absorb nutrients as well as water.
I just want to mention a part of our maintenance routine is we do fertilize with the citrus fruit tree food.
Yeah.
So that's okay.
Yeah, and so let me just say, so by the way, I was a landscape maintenance manager for 3 years, so I know a pretty good amount about maintenance in general, and citrus specifically needs a lot more nitrogen, and it needs a lot of other nutrients that your standard fruit trees don't. So fruit trees in general need nutrition, citrus needs more nutrition. And so when I'm designing, typically I'm trying to put like even more sort of nitrogen fixers around the fruit trees. And sort of also sort of your organic standard citrus food is definitely beneficial, especially if you've got maintenance people who know when to put it on. All right? Okay, so that's the laundry and landscape system. Let's go take a look at the